So you have seen the exhibition. There's 3 rooms. And I designed these 3 rooms with a kind of different approach that says something about the subject of the exhibition or the concept. In this first space, so I decided this is the first space, you walk in, and in this room I presented works that, for me at least in my interpretation, have something more specifically to do with system. The second room, where we will go later, has something to do with image and deception. Deception or betrayal, or, well, that's like a synonym. And I will explain this to you in a second. And the last room for me has to do with boundaries. So we will walk through the exhibition in such a way. But first, I want to say something about the, let's say, the origin of this idea that I had about post-system or system. And so we have to go back in time, 25 years or almost 26 years now. So then I was about 22 or 23 years old, and I myself was a student in the painting department of the academy in Antwerp in Belgium, where I'm from. And I was in a master degree painting department. And but already for a long time, through my studies, I really didn't like to make artworks. I really didn't like to make paintings. And I was sort of revolting against making artworks and revolting against the idea that I would present myself as an artist. At the same time, I think in my 3rd year of studies, I was introduced to the professor of philosophy, art philosophy. Mark Luiten is his name. And, you know, he was a philosopher, he was teaching theory, so we all had to go to his class and to his courses. But at some point, the academy decided that he should also do studio visits with the students. And for me, this was a very important moment, because, of course, he approached the work that the art students were doing in a very specific and a very different type of way than, for example, the teachers of painting or the teachers of photography, let's say. So he and I had a lot of conversations, and he sort of made me understand that maybe my path in my career, in my studies, is not to produce artworks, but to go into the field of art theory or philosophy in my case. So after my graduation of I have a master degree in painting, which is kind of funny. I didn't do anything with that for 25 years. But then I went to study philosophy. And the combination of those two things, like having had, let's say, an artistic education in terms of painting, and then the theoretical studies of philosophy, the combination of that made me go in the direction of curatorship, which I do now, also 25 years. So 25 years ago, I made those two things that are on the wall. If you come closer. So when I was thinking about artworks, revolting against making artworks myself. At some point, I cleaned out my studio at the academy. I remember that I even painted the floor white and all the walls white and all these things. And I set a beautiful desk in the middle of my studio. And I borrowed the typewriter of my grandfather. And I started to compose a text. Then later one of the teachers said you wrote a manifesto that is very important, and then I completely forgot about this thing. And I found it again about 1.5 years ago in a box. It was traveling with me to all the places I lived. I found it again. I was like, maybe this could be something to revisit and to design or develop a new exhibition based on these old ideas of the year 2000. This was. There's two things that are important, let's say, in the context of this exhibition, but even more so in the context of the development of this concept that I had about system, about control. And I'm going to show you images of artworks that I saw a very long time ago. So with the Academy, we would go on excursions. They would take us on a bus trip to Cologne in Germany to see important exhibitions. This is a Belgian artist, so I saw this work in Brussels. I'm just going to show it to you, and then you will say, ah, yeah, I know this image. It's a very well-known painting. So this is by the Belgian artist René Magritte. He painted this in the year 1929. And of course we see a painting of a pipe, and below it says the text in French, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe," which means this is not a pipe, right? So when I saw this artwork in real, I mean not in a catalog or whatever, like in person, for the first time, I understood that there's a difference between the image of an artwork and the reality. So image and reality, this sort of kind of thing, made me think about this. Also, writing on a painting was really a kind of new thing in 1929. It happened, of course, in advertisement and in other, let's say, disciplines, more in the graphic design sector, for example. But in painting, this was kind of a revolutionary kind of thing. So this image, for me, the title, by the way, is not "This is not a pipe," but the original title is "La trahison des images," which means the betrayal of the image, the deception, betrayal of the image. So this is what I'm talking about in this exhibition. This one you recognized immediately. The second one, which I saw in Germany, and it sort of blew me off my feet, is this one. I will come closer because it's almost nothing to see, actually. Do you know this one? Good. So when I saw this work for the first time in the exhibition of Robert Rauschenberg, the American artist Robert Rauschenberg, he had like a survey exhibition in Cologne. The title of this work, do you know the title of this work?
No, of course.
No, of course. I will show it to you. I will say nothing now, and then I will explain. So the title of this work of 1953 is Erased Willem de Kooning Drawing. So basically what did naughty Robert Rauschenberg do? At that time, Willem de Kooning was a very, very famous, sort of art star famous abstract expressionist painter from Holland who had made a big career in the United States. And he was like the hot shot. He was like super famous, selling works all the time. And Robert Rauschenberg in that year, 1953, was a very young artist. He bought a drawing of Willem de Kooning, and then he erased it. Title, of course, Erased Willem de Kooning Drawing. And for me, this was also a very, very important moment when I saw this work in real, in the museum. The sort of, like when I talk about system and post-system, this is for me an act of post-system. Many years later, in the early 90s or mid-90s, the French philosopher and curator this guy, I forget his name, wrote a book called Post-Production, Jérôme Sans, and Nicolas Bourriaud. He is also co-founder of the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, but that's beside the point. So he wrote a book about a phenomenon in art which he called post-production, which means like you make something and I continue to, sort of work on it. Sometimes this can be, let's say, allowed with your permission. Sometimes it can be like this. It's my artwork now. I bought it legally. I can sort of do with it what I want. Especially in 1953, there was not so much, let's say, discussion about the legality of copyright and ownership and all these things like now. But this for me is an act of post-production and also post-system. Another work that I found very important by Robert Rauschenberg is this one. It's called Factum 1 and Factum 2. So it's also an early work of Rauschenberg. So also in that time when New York was sort of captivated by abstract expressionist painting that was like the macho male style of the moment. Rauschenberg, coming from, I think, like Miami or like Florida somewhere, he came to New York, he saw these works of abstract expressionist power, and he created one painting with these drippings and splashes of paint and collage and decollage, and then he made exactly the same again, which for me was like, okay, you can, sort of like now there's no need anymore to pay attention to abstract expressionism in some way. So these are, for me, important works that eventually led to things that are happening here in this text. I talk about the deception of the image. I talk about system of the artwork. When you see, for example, how Rauschenberg worked, like the erasing of an image, it's basically a concept, a system for me. In my interpretation. If you see how he made one abstract expressionist painting or inspired by this style and then made it again, not like a copy, it's not like a, mechanical copy, it's like made by hand, then he's talking about, in my interpretation, about system. So in the year 2000, I was thinking even more about this. So you have to imagine I was a student in painting. I had a lot of difficulties with this medium, with making an image on a canvas and hanging it on a wall. Then the teachers come and they say like, well, I don't know. And I was like, okay, I don't like this anymore. Then I recognized that when I talk about system, let's say a painter or an artist in general would speak about artistic process. Like I followed this artistic process in my, artwork and this and this. When you move, for example, to photography is very much based on system. You have technical camera. If you develop your photos in a dark room, you have to pay attention to the developer, the bath with water, the fixation bath, and all these things, like a very fixed system how to make a good photograph. So I start to sort of imagine that every artwork follows a system. I think that's also the first sentence. All art follows a system. Then I also say all art is always artificial and never spontaneous. That's kind of like a play on the word, because art, it's like not, this doesn't happen like, in a sort of natural way. It's like constructed. So I was thinking about these things, like if you make a painting, you organize your paint, you prepare the stretcher bars, you cut the canvas, you know how to stretch the canvas the way it should be done. You know the painting, the physicality of the painting, in and out, back and forth. I was playing with this idea. So that doesn't mean that my statement of 25 years ago is the absolute truth. That would be kind of funny. So this exhibition, in some way, deals with system, also with control, also with boundaries. There's artworks who sort of completely fit in this kind of almost dogmatic idea of art follows a system. And of course, there's also artworks who, don't really care so much about that. So when I curate this exhibition, I included artists who I know for a long time and who indeed work systematically on their art, following a certain system. And there's also artists who say no, it's very spontaneous. I don't think it just flows out of me naturally. I also include this as a way to oppose my own statement. This little thing, this white canvas, actually is, it's in the wall text also. I'm not sure, I should actually ask my mom, but I think this is the last surviving artwork that I made in, I forget, 2000 also. I'm gonna hang it like this. It's new interaction. I made it in the year 2000. also with the typewriter. And I think it's the last thing that survived, let's say, in that year. So this was really the moment when I moved from the Department of Painting to the university to study philosophy. And the text on the canvas says, "Nothing can be held in my hands for long." This thing traveled with me to all the countries and cities where I lived. It was always sort of like somewhere in my living room or like in my apartments. So it was sort of exhibited in a private atmosphere, in a private setting for, 25 years in cities across the world. But this is the very first time I show it in public. I kind of like it like this. And I was thinking about this sentence, "Nothing can be held in my hands for long," which of course had to do with the fact that I don't enjoy making artworks. Each time when I tried to, there was always the sort of like moment of destruction of what I was doing. Like I didn't want to see this thing. When I was thinking like, now I'm going to paint the landscape, and I was like, no, there should be a lot of snow or mist over the landscape. You don't see anything anymore. Monochrome painting. As I said, in this room, many of the artworks actually have really something to do with system. For example, when we look at the work of Daria Sviatun, I met her in Kiev in her studio about 2 years ago. And what I find very interesting about the work of Daria is that, so she told me that many of her, let's say, childhood photos and family photos have been lost. So all these like memories that she had through those photos, they were lost. And at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, she started to scan her drawings and watercolors as a sort of way to digitize it, to keep a digital archive. At some point, something went wrong with the scanner, or she moved maybe the watercolor under the scanner bed, and she created accidentally this kind of, let's say, glitch. She noticed this and she found some kind of, let's say, a new avenue or an avenue towards new images. So when I talk about this room is more about system, it's an accident that happened mechanically and that led her to create new images. Of course, I still see sort of these technical elements maybe in the composition or the choice of colors. Maybe it's because I know the background story of the scanning that I see this in her work. But I also find very important not only what we see on the top, but also what we see, not really the bottom, because the grain monochrome part takes more space, more than half of the space of the canvas. So we will see this element also throughout the exhibition a couple of times. There is something in that gray space that we are not seeing, but it's for me very present, let's say. It speaks to me a lot. It's like a little bit like to make a reference to the erased Willem de Kooning kind of thing. You see traces of something, but you don't know actually what was there. When I referred to Rauschenberg's Factum 1 and Factum 2, I also look at the work of Daria, which is a found photography. And for some reason, this also captivated her, inspired her, because she doesn't quite understand why someone took, with an analog camera, 2 almost identical photos of the same landscape, the same view. The painting behind you now is also very important to me. It's a work by Hans Segers, a Belgian artist. And he actually was my teacher at the art department of the Academy. He is someone who also 25 years ago talked to me about all these things that I was referring to, the text that I wrote, the inability to paint, etc., etc. Hans is probably the most important example of an artist who works with a very, very strict system. So basically what Hans does in all his work, of course I only show this one here, so when I had a studio visit with Hans like a year ago or a year and a half ago, he said like, well, first I have to think about the painting. And the thinking about the painting takes a long time. As soon as he feels or he's certain about the fact that he thought the painting, the whole painting, he will make the painting, he will create the painting. And often he makes a grid on the canvas, because that's also like how he thinks in his he has a mental image of the painting. And then he starts to compose the painting on the canvas. So what is about this painting? He thought, okay, I'm gonna make a cage or something, let's say, like a geometric shape using 100% black, 100% white, 50% gray. That's the composition, that's how it will be. And he doesn't allow any kind of, let's say, deviations to happen in the process. He will not say like, no, here should be a touch of pink, or I will change something. No, the way he thought about the painting will be the result of the painting on canvas also. And he does this with all his work. Also important for me, when I was a student, it was like, okay, what's the title of this artwork? Let's see. Displacing. Daria said, okay, this work is titled Displacing. The title is saying something that allows the viewer who wants more information to understand something else about the painting that you cannot see in the painting, in most cases, in this case at least. In the case of Hans, this work, it's called, again in French, I don't know why, because he's from Antwerp, Étude d'un espace. It's a study for a space. And what I liked about this title is that when I was, let's say, struggling with making paintings and I have like a fixed image, and that's the image that people will look at, here Hans sort of opened a new space. It's not, the title is not the space or something, or a space. No, it's a study for a space. That means that this is just one study. It's a painting, okay, but it's also a study. So there's also other types of spaces that are possible. So for me, that was also important that this work is like, let's say, one element that opens towards many other elements. I placed the work of Alexis Stoelen next to the work of Hans. They are two completely different types of painters, artist painters. But I liked this sort of like visual element of this geometric type of space that repeats in the work of Alexis. To give an idea, Hans is about 73, Alexis is 47. Different generations of artists. Alexis is a type of painter who starts working on his canvas without a specific idea. He sometimes sees like some kind of a small object in his studio or something he finds in the street that kind of inspires him, and he places it in a corner or whatever, like a place where he is painting, and he starts to like investigate on the canvas while painting. Complete different type of painters. But still, even if he works, let's say, in this kind of spontaneous, free-floating manner, of course, he's also looking for composition, tension, paying attention to color, and all these elements that are part of the process of making a painting. Then we also have this work of video by the Czech artist Adela Mitova. I worked for 6 years in Prague at an art academy, and she was a student there. When I saw this work, I also included it in another exhibition I did in the Czech Republic. The title of this work is Tension. Basically what she's doing, it's a performance of 20 minutes, approximately 20 minutes. She's slowly swallowing like 6 meters of yarn, of string, all the way down her throat, which is happening basically now. And as soon as that process is finished, she will slowly take it out again. That is basically the performance that she's doing. She's often doing this kind of performances with her body, sort of like detecting what is the boundary of her, let's say, physical endurance or physical boundary, let's say, in this way. So here she's taking it out again. What I also like about this is that there's a kind of circular movement, like it going in and it's going out, and of course the video repeats going in and out, etc., etc. So many of these things I talk about, many of these ideas, they sort of connect to different artworks and create, for me at least, this kind of circular type of thing, movement through the space. So in this space, as I mentioned, for me, many of the artworks, almost all of the artworks, have something to do with how artists apply a certain system in their work. And of course, there's also this constant element that there's a boundary to a system. Systems are limited. She thought about doing this performance. She probably didn't think beforehand that she would cough and have this kind of reflex. She needs a glass of water sometimes to, make the process go smoother. In the second space, as I've already mentioned, many things here have to do with image, and of course in the context of this exhibition or in the context of my background about the concept, also with deception. As you can also see apart from one work, everything here is black and white and gray, which is also a conscious decision. Here it is definitely painting and photography. We have two paintings by Anna Warszawska. One photo by the Belgian artist Leentje Brands, Christina Moss, a Ukrainian artist, and Katerina Mirgorod. What I find interesting here is that while in the first space, let's say, we can look at the works and we can also look at the system that made the work. But here, we automatically look at what is being pictured in the paintings and in the photos. We sort of forget suddenly all these things that I was saying about system. We don't have to pay attention anymore to, but this is a constructed painting. It's stretched on canvas. The dimensions are this, and look what kind of paintbrush she used. And no, we don't pay attention to the system of the artwork anymore, but we look at the image. We look at the porcelain plate and a hand of a mannequin, an ashtray, an egg, and a cigarette in a specific composition. This work for me by Anna Warszawska is definitely an important one. If we think about that big monochrome space in the work of Daria, I see a kind of similarity in this work by Anna. The title of this work is No Name. First, when she wrote me, about her artwork, I was thinking maybe she means untitled, no name. That's something we don't usually say, but she really means no name. So it refers to someone, name for a person. Of course, there is no person visible. We have only the illusion of someone underneath this veil. But of course, this is for me very interesting because when I talk about the image and deception, if you see a portrait of someone, it is not that someone. In this case of the, let's say, no-name type of painting of Anna, there is not even a person underneath this veil. It's like a kind of symbolical, metaphorical representation of a someone who has no identity. It's like a removal of removal of removal. Much in this painting also has to do with this pin that you see here. So Anna describes the painting as having something to do with a potential injury, with a kind of internal lingering pain. She was, let's say, away from the art scene, or she stopped making paintings for I think 2.5 years, and recently she returned to making paintings. She often refers to subjects of mythology and philosophy, and of course also like personal experiences and personal emotions. And these two works of art, they also captivated me when I saw them in her atelier, in her studio here in Lviv. So as I said, like in this space, we automatically start to pay attention to the images. The work here on this wall is titled Serving Setting. And Anna talks very beautifully about like when we set the table. Like she talks about the quiet choreography of the morning routine, for example. Very, very beautiful sentence. And what I find really captivating is that, if I would invite you for breakfast and I serve you this kind of setting, you would be like maybe looking a bit awkward. Like, there's a porcelain or like a kind of mannequin hand on a plate, black tablecloth, like strange light, maybe an ashtray with an egg and a cigarette. So she uses all these kind of symbolical elements in a very, very specific composition, I would say. It's very photographic, actually. That's why this work is also in this space. Maybe not so much that one, but for me, this one is very photographic. Anna talks in her work a lot about, let's say, body, but also the sort of like distance from body. So she works a lot with mannequins in her compositions. The mannequin hand in this painting is kind of also a deception, because if we think about a mannequin in a shopping window, for example, most of those things are made of plastic, right? The disposable kind of material. But she added this kind of suggestion of marble in her painting. And like she refers to the monumental and disposable, for example. When we pay attention to the photo of Leentje Brands there, in another, like, I know her very well, so I can say much more about Leentje. So let's go back to system for a while, just for a little while. What Leentje does to make her works, she works very, very slowly. She's been working for, let's say, approximately 20 years as a photographer, as an artist, and her, let's say, body of work is kind of small. Why is this? Because like Hans, first she has to think about the photo that she wants to take. So she makes this kind of mental image of a photo that she wants to take somewhere. As soon as she has this image in her mind, she has to go out to find this in reality. So that is not always super easy. And she always does it at night. This is also taken at night. So with long exposure, like a tripod long exposure, sometimes with an additional lamp or light if it's really too dark. And often also in places where she's not allowed to go, or where it is, like, let's say, considered dangerous. So all these things combined, she doesn't have like a big body of work. So these are the steps that the artist takes. She first has to think about an image that she wants to make a photo of. As soon as she has the image in her mind, she has to go out to find this image in reality. For a long time, she was doing this with her little bicycle in Belgium, like going all the way around, until she finds this, let's say, space, this scene, which meets her mental image, and then she has to go through the whole process of going there, sometimes trespassing at night, maybe with a friend to help her, and then of course the whole process of like selecting the image and processing and all these things. The funny thing about this photo, that's background information, should not be recorded actually, but background information, it's like when you look at the other photos of, or also this one in your case maybe, but if you look at the photos of Leentje, it's always like, oh, that's a very strange space, like where is it, like in some kind of like faraway country or something, and like, no, it's just this corner of Belgium, that corner of Belgium. And when I was doing a studio visit with her, I said like, hey, I know this place. And she was like, no, you cannot know this place. I was like, yes, I know. And the funny thing is, like, she isolated, of course, this section in the photo. So you see like these bushes, like going maybe like all the way up, and it's like weird and scary. It's like they're moving, and then have like this perfect geometric kind of cabin or structure, and a kind of dirty floor. So basically, what this is in a region in the province of Belgium called Limburg. Old people go here to pray. Yeah, you know?
No, yeah.
So old people go here to pray. And so when the lights are on in this sort of construction, you would see like a Maria statue. And or like here's some like normally a guy sitting and you have to buy a ticket. And then here's like a cave, an artificial cave with the bigger Maria sculpture where then people go pray. I've been there to pray, of course. And when I noticed this in her atelier, and I said like, yeah, I think I know this place. And she said like, yes, but you cannot tell anyone. Sorry. Christina, I met about, let's say, a year ago, less than a year ago. Christina is also part of an exhibition I have now in Italy called Echoes of Unity with 9 Ukrainian artists. And this is a project, a long-term project by Christina Moss, which deals with her family history of migration and sort of like finding identity in, let's say, the complexity of her grandfather moved to Canada, her mom moved to another place in the European Union, and now since 2022, Christina with her partner live in Warsaw in Poland. And based on like the images that she has from her family archive, she's trying to sort of like meet with or reconstruct elements of her family history of migration. And she does it in a kind of she does it in a poetic way, in my opinion. Together we selected these 7 photos out of her whole project about her family history. Specifically these, of course you will start to notice like visual elements that repeat also in this room. For example, the veil, the white veil versus the painting of Anna Warszawska. This sort of like playfulness with a string between her feet, which make a kind of geometric construction like we see in the other room, the paintings. But for me also this one, she's using kind of, like small objects that she has in her studio or in like somewhere. She makes a kind of a construction like on a stool, which becomes like a geometric type of monument of nothing, basically. She's hiding her face in some way, like in the work of Anna Warszawska. Mirror is also an important element. It's sort of like a presence of someone who is, but you don't really see the image, the person, you see only the reflection. So this distancing, which I also find in the work of Anna Warszawska, for example. On this wall, we have 2 works, 2 photos of Katerina Mirgorod. In many ways, for me, the work of Katerina Mirgorod is very important. She is a young artist. She had to flee from Lugansk with her mom in 2022, and they went all the way to Norwich, England. And at that time, I was in contact with a lot of artists, emerging artists in Ukraine. And Katerina, she sent me her portfolio. And I was like, I like these black and white photos or dark photos of flowers. She has like 20 or something. And I contacted her and we did a video call. And she was completely unable to talk about her art. This was in March or April 2022. And I could see that she was like really uncomfortable. Although she agreed to have a video call about her artworks, she was very uncomfortable about speaking about her art, and she basically told me like she cannot think about making artworks. She feels guilty if she would think about making artworks. And these works about the portraits of flowers she made in 2022, and are also still the last let's say artworks that she made since 2022. These works were included in a very big exhibition I did in Belgium called Crisis of Imagination, which dealt not so much about, well, in one way, crisis of imagination, people who go through trauma, experience a period of artistic stagnation and are incapable of producing new artworks. But in that context, it also had to do with the crisis of imagination of people in Belgium who don't know anything about Ukraine and can't imagine like what life is in Ukraine. So there was like a sort of storytelling kind of exhibition about imagination, and Katerina was one of the artists. So she calls these portraits of flowers. She made them in Kharkiv in 2022. After that, she had to like leave her home, and she's not working as an artist, but at this moment. But I believe that one day she might return to making artworks at her own pace. So here in this space, as I mentioned, we look more at the images and what they maybe mean, but what they could be like referring to in whatever way, like metaphorically or symbolically, or in sort of like very personal way. In the third room, first of all, here we have a kind of I will call it transitional work by Katia Kopeikina. I met her in her studio in Kyiv. Now she lives in Berlin, lives and works in Berlin. For me, the work of Katerina Kopeikina is kind of interesting because she's definitely an artist who sort of doesn't really have an idea before working on in this case, painting. She's also a tattoo artist, which I think is kind of funny because as a tattoo artist, you really have to know before you start tattooing what you will do, which is very planned and structured. So she has this kind of weird universe of like spontaneity and teen culture and doom and sort of carelessness, but also sadness and like falling in and out of love. And then there's war and, you know, fuck Putin, like all these things are like involved in her work. And I use this kind of like as a transitional work to the next phase, which for me is more about, let's say, boundaries. And so after Katia, we immediately see the work of the Belgian artist Chris Gevers. So when I mentioned in the first place, Hans Segers was my professor, my teacher in painting. And this guy, Chris, was my fellow student. So Hans and Chris, we know each other for like 7 years or something. And Chris is also this kind of, we call it bona fide painter. Like he's like, I paint, I don't need to deal with art theory and all these things. Like the emotions have to like flow out of me onto the canvas. And I always appreciated his work. Actually, when I was doing that typewriting kind of ridiculous thing, he was in the studio next to me, painting with mayonnaise and ketchup and tartar and other things, and glue, and then setting it on fire. And I was like, we'll see what happens now. When I met him also, like in his studio 2 years ago, he was looking for a painting that he made in 2000 or 2001, and with all these like, you know, food products, and it had like hair on it. It still survived somehow, but there was a lot of hair on this canvas. And so it's very much also about physicality. But I selected these two paintings of Chris. It's the same artist, two different kind of work methods and styles, let's say. On the left, you see a kind of exploded portrait. I mean, it's a portrait because I know it's a portrait. Sort of like this explosion of paint. And on the right, you see that he actually uses also fashion magazine clippings. This sort of insinuation maybe of the monochrome space, like in the work of Daria and some other works that we saw. And on the work on the right also has like he paid attention a lot to aesthetic, to beauty. Now I will tell you who these are. The painting on the left is a portrait of Alberto Giacometti, the Italian sculptor, artist who moved to Paris a long time ago. And Giacometti never was satisfied with his own work. He was always like in some kind of a crisis, mental crisis, and then like very disturbing type of personality. At some point, Chris was completely fascinated by the work and also the biography of Giacometti, so he decided to make a painting of Alberto Giacometti in this kind of like explosion of ideas and internal struggles. At some moment in the life of Alberto, we can say Alberto, the title is Alberto. So Alberto was already older, an older artist, very well respected artist, important in the Paris art scene and international art scene. He meets a young, attractive woman called Caroline or Caroline. And at that time, Caroline was 20 years old and she was a sex worker. Alberto became completely fascinated with Caroline. She became his muse. And at the end of his life, he made a lot of portraits actually of Caroline. She was always with him. He bought her an apartment in Paris. She could go to parties and he would pay for everything, while of course Alberto was married. But that's a detail, I guess. And so the left portrait of Alberto, I think, is painted in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. And last year, in 2025, Chris sort of revisited his fascination with the work and the biography of Giacometti, and he decided to also make a portrait of Caroline to sort of reunite these two former lovers. And you can see that the style is different. There's also like 10 years, the works are made 10 years apart. And what I like definitely is that he used commercial or fashion magazine clippings to like compose all these elements. And I'm saying this because Chris is definitely someone who is leaning more toward, let's say, the nostalgic old times. Like he believes in paint and sitting in the library for 1 year to find the perfect word in a book. This is what I was looking for. And he sort of doesn't like the fast tendencies of modern technology and like new media in art. But still, I found this element of like mass media or popular media in his work in the portrait of Caroline. When I talk about boundaries in this space, we have two videos by Steve Schepens. Steve, so we have a small screen with a flashing light. It's a very long noise performance that he and his friends, other artists, did in his studio in Brussels at that time, I think. And then we have a projection of Steve himself trying to do a performance in the North Sea with a box on his head. Steve passed away in 2022, unfortunately. But he was always looking for boundaries. Like he was always putting himself in a very, very difficult position or a difficult circumstances where he would make his work of art, where he would make his performance or these kind of things. So a difficult place to make a work is, for example, in the North Sea in February it was, when the water was like 10 degrees. And another kind of boundary is that this noise performance, and it's of course not necessary to look at the whole thing, it's very, very abstract, flashing. This noise performance was actually inspired by a song by the American noise rock band Sonic Youth. They started in the 1980s and they Until 2011, they were very active international. And on one of the albums of Sonic Youth, there's a song called Nick Fit, which is sort of like super hectic, very fast with nonsensical lyrics. But that song is only 1 minute and 30 seconds, for example. And Steve, with his friends, did this kind of like nonsensical, very loud guitar and noise performance for, I think, 1 hour until the point of exhaustion, and then going farther and farther and farther. That's what I mean with boundaries in this context. And he used a lot of cardboard in his work because he saw this material as sort of a residue of contemporary society. Like we all know, like you can buy stuff online on Temu, on AliExpress and all these things. And whatever you buy online, they deliver it to you in a very nice box. And then the box goes away. And there's a lot of this stuff. So he's using kind of a material that is hollow, that has like no purpose after it's fulfilled its function, let's say. Discarded materials. And of course, it cannot be protected against the North Sea, apparently. And then we have another artist from Ukraine. Maybe you know her, right? Galina Dubik. When we think about the monochrome space of Daria, we see here a kind of black, dark gray monochrome space, which is all about hiding something. There's something underneath, but we have no idea what it is. What I also mean with boundaries is that in editing, like the work of Leentje, for example, Galina consciously cuts the subject of her image to a specific frame. Of course, we recognize human body, but it's an anonymous type of human body. We can only recognize certain elements, but she's always like laying over this kind of very strange, like veils, like here also, like especially here, I mean, sort of like strips of like transparent color that adds another kind of dimension to the painting. It's about the body, of course. It's about the corporeality. Body not specifically or only in the sense of the human body. Of course, in these two examples, we automatically have more references to the human body, but also body of like non-human body, and what we do with a body, what happens to a body, like preservation of a body after death, like the evolution after death, for example, after the body. So this is also for me work that is, knowing Galina since 2023 maybe, or 24, she's also someone who works very slow in a kind of almost hesitant type of way, like I spoke about the work of Leentje. She's like very like self-controlled, like trying to maintain self-control. She's painting in some kind of a unique type of universe that is very isolated. And that's also something that I really like about the work of Galina. Also, when you meet her as a person, you feel like a kind of isolation, sort of self-isolation. Leading to some kind of a, let's say, mystery. At the same time, she's also a tattoo artist, very, very, very good tattoo artist, actually. And she recently graduated from Lviv National Academy. You're a student there also?
Yes.
Oh, I see. That's the whole exhibition, actually. I don't have like a sort of final conclusion, but if you have questions about anything I said, or disagreements. Now that I see the title of the work of Steve, all of the works are titled Horror. And just to, sort of to wrap it up, like, he was a very funny guy, like, but he also had these kind of ideas that when you introduce yourself to a person, maybe you think about it, you want to come across as nice or whatever. And his approach in terms of his art was like, well, if I title all my work horror, then immediately people will understand like, ooh, something is going to be wrong with this work, or it's going to be maybe just scary or strange, or I will feel uncomfortable. So he was also like putting this kind of boundary on his work. He once said to me like, it's like you start a moment with disappointment. That was the intention of his work. The work that he exhibits, he wants to start with a kind of disappointment. And in a private moment, he told me like, these people who cook for you, and then they put the food on the table and they say something like, it will probably not be so good. And he said like, he told me like he had a girlfriend and she cooked for him, nice evening. They already had like an aperitif, a glass of wine, candles and all these things. And she said like, it will probably not be so good. And he said like, in that case, I'm going to go home and call a pizza. So it's like you start a moment with disappointment. Well, then you can also be disappointed if you approach a situation like this. So for him, it was about horror, about boundaries, and also about a lot of humor, actually. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.